There's one saying I've heard that if your company doesn't have a space strategy, you need one. Many people still, I think, feel, oh, I'll never get to space and it's only like billionaires. But really, these rockets are being built to do point to point travel around the world as well. If you want to fly from Los Angeles to Singapore with a rocket, you could do it in 30 minutes.
Hello and welcome to Polyweb. I'm your host, Sara Landi Tortoli, and my guest today is Ben Hadelman, a space entrepreneur and founder of Lifeship, a company whose mission is to send human DNA to the moon to spread life. With Ben, among many things, we talk about how to build highly complex and specialized products, how we will become a multiplanetary species, and what are the biggest opportunities in the space industry.
It's all kind of happening. The rockets are being built that'll carry people to the moon and Mars and actually build settlements and cities there. Lots of stuff is going to be built. And all the things that you have here on Earth, whether it's hotels and buildings, restaurants and bars, like all the businesses you need here on Earth will be needed in space.
Ben, welcome to Polyweb.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to chat. Excited to be here.
All right. So I think a good place to start is what should I know about you and your early years to understand the person that you are today and your life journey?
Yeah. I played with Legos. I was always building things. I was curious about space. I loved to figure out how things worked. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time in nature. And all this kind of led towards an interest in space and an interest in building things and then I was always into big challenges as well. Like I would see mountains and be like, I want to climb that and, and go do it or want to build something bigger or taller. And yeah, and that went on through high school and college. And I did marathons in high school. And then I did Ironman triathlons soon after that. And then I did 100-mile runs and climbed really big rocks. And it would kind of happen kind of quickly. Like I would go to Yosemite and see the biggest cliff there, El Capitan, and I'd be like, I want to start rock climbing. I'd climb that, and I would do it within a year. And so yeah, I was into both figuring out how to make things work and how to do the planning and the strategy and the engineering and the physical parts of how you get through something and make something work, as well as big vision moonshots. And this ended up taking me to working on big things in space and sending lots of things to space. And then now building the company I'm building, which is a big moonshot.
I'm also a very sportive person, always have been. Uh, I'm curious to know what's the relationship between sports and especially like very competitive sport like Ironman. You mentioned, you were doing Ironman, you were running. So, what's the relationship between sports and how that helped you in your journey creating your own company?
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's two parts to that I'll touch on. One is I got into endurance sports. So Ironman triathlons, 100-mile ultra marathon runs. I was a professional cyclist and did multi-day cycling races. And with those, there's a path of both this goal of, oh, I'm training for this race and it is the big, but then there's also learning to enjoy the process of training for it and that be part of it. And it's like working towards something big, but also enjoying that in the moment and using those long-term goals to I don't know, stay aligned and keep excited about it. And that's one part. But then I think another big thing I learned, especially with rock climbing, is risk tolerance and being able to stay calm and collected and keep moving forward even when in a really dangerous hard situation and making all the right decisions and I think part of it is then training that we can walk a lot closer to the edge of the cliff than you might initially think. And a lot of that is then related to starting a company or being an entrepreneur or even or even doing stuff in space, because the old way of doing stuff in space was to plan for 20 years to build a satellite and analyze every single possible result and spend billions of dollars and take decades to do it. And the newer way of doing space is to be agile and take a fast pace approach and take risks. And risks don't mean make dumb decisions. Risks mean like becoming more attuned, yeah, to that gut instinct of whether each of the million things that need to go right to make it work, like whether each of them are right or not. And rather than going analyzing every single one until it's more attunement to, okay, I can do this, I can take this step, I can start this company, I can follow this dream, and keeping staking taking those steps and having a new relationship with fear. And I think, yeah, rock climbing, but also bike racing and all that really attuned my relationship to where I'm comfortable and what I can do.
Was it something that came naturally to you? Like you just, you know, did it? Or did you have to work on it?
It all was a process. I learned how to become more comfortable. I learned how to then do harder things. I learned how to be more comfortable doing multi-day hard things and sleeping on the edges of cliffs. And it just became, yeah, an attuning and a practice and a more natural state of living in that way.
So, alongside being an athlete, you also studied mechanical engineering. And maybe for listeners and also for me, can you describe what were your early days in your career like? What were you working on?
Yeah.
Because like I did some research and it sounds super exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So mechanical engineering is like the physical things, like how like the the metal parts, the plastic parts, the mirrors, the bearings, the yeah, all the pieces and how it comes together. And I studied that in my undergrad at Penn State University, and then I went to grad school at Berkeley, partly because it was a really good bike racing team, but it was one of the top mechanical engineering schools. And I started working in a lab with a professor, a chemistry professor, and I designed this benchtop instrument to detect amino acids in soil samples on Mars. And it was an early prototype instrument with NASA and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which builds a lot of instruments for space, to look for amino acids, which are a sign of life. And one of these now launched on a later rover mission, a later version of this, and it has detected signs of amino acids in the soil there. So it means there likely was type of some type of microbial life at some point, if not more, on Mars. And yeah, so that instrument had lasers in it and mirrors and optics and circuit boards and software, and I wrote the software for it. And so kind of a complete and little fluidic channels and tiny little pumps to pump liquid around. And yeah, that was the designing of a complete instrument and my first real space project. And that got me into space. And then I went on, left my PhD after I finished my master's and did a little of my PhD because I got a job offer to go build big telescopes. And so these are big optical telescopes with mirrors on mountaintops around the world. And I spent 8 years doing that and designing these telescopes. And those have been used to find all sorts of new planets outside of our solar system. And and to also look at the spectroscopy of them, which you can then tell, is there water on this planet, or is there carbon dioxide? Is there what is the atmosphere like? And so we've been able to find planets that are potentially Earth-like or could potentially either have life have had life before or one day we could bring life to. And so that got me more and more into space and on that path. And then I moved up to San Francisco and started work with a company, Planet Labs. And I was about the 20th person to join Planet. And we built small satellites to image the whole world every day. And I designed the whole camera system for these satellites. And we put over 300 satellites in space. It was the most satellites anyone had ever put in space. These were used to image the whole world every day. And I was there for 5 years, and the company grew pretty big. And I went on to coordinate with the rockets and getting satellites to space and negotiating rocket contracts and working on new types of space missions, and really got me both a business side of it and a product side, because we also had artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at the imagery and start to categorize things and make it so you can calculate where every tree disappeared in the last 24 hours, or ships that were doing illegal fishing, and really, yeah, really using space to help care for Earth. And and yeah, that really also rounded me out in that direction as far as I was kind of nerdy space, and I initially was like, oh, I want to just want to be part of space missions and stuff going to space. And I've always spent a lot of time in nature, and I am very, very in love with the Earth. But with Planet, there really was this, okay, we're using space to help Earth, and it's about the Earth, and it's how we care for the Earth. And yeah, and I've definitely really carried that through in the company I'm building now.
Can I ask you a very stupid question, maybe?
Of course.
Maybe, like, but what is life? Like when you say, we're looking for life, in the solar system and outside, what exactly are you looking for? Because like life for life, well, okay, first thing that comes to mind is, human life, right? So some form of intelligent, cognizant, type of being. That's the first thing. Then, okay, maybe let's simplify. Maybe like it's macrobial. No,
Yeah.
how do you say that? Macro,
Microbes,
yeah,
microbial.
macrobial, so that's what comes to my mind. But maybe that's completely not what I should think about. So what is life?
There's definitely a lot of people who've defined it in different ways, and it, I I'm not sure what an exact definition for it is, but I think most would agree it's something that reproduces. It's something that uses energy from its environment and takes that energy in and grows or utilizes the energy. Yeah, something that rearranges molecules and utilizes material and energy. But definitely, then there are different levels of consciousness and what is conscious life and what intelligent life is, and there's lots of attempted definitions at that as well.
Yeah, I guess so. And maybe are there any helpful concepts that me or listeners should know before about space, and also about like common misconception, that we should know before we move farther in this conversation to better understand what you're doing now?
Yes. So I guess a couple of pieces which build into what I'm actually doing. One is there's a hypothesis called the Gaia hypothesis, and that is that the whole Earth is living, and the Earth is an entity. And as part of that, what's come to me is that the Earth is intelligent. The Earth has grown all these different species. The Earth has grown us. We've come out of the Earth, and that the Earth also wants to reproduce, and the Earth wants to spread more life, and the universe wants more life, and there is the concept that this is one way that life spreads throughout the galaxy, is that either spores or some type of seeds get or some type of bacteria comes off of planets, either when an asteroid strikes into them, it could knock spores off, or it does seem like there are spores that can float up high enough in the atmosphere and maybe even leave. And so there are natural ways that planets can get life into space, and that these and there's many people that believe that deep space, which is the vacuum of space, is actually has all these spores and like seeds floating through it, and these may be tiny, and they may be on asteroids that float by. And we know that there are interstellar, they call it asteroids, they're interstellar rocks that float, that have come from other star systems and float through the solar system. And so that was shown recently, that there was a rock that is on a trajectory that can't be in orbit around our sun, and it shot through our solar system. And so there are, yeah, there's materials that go from star to star. There's spores and seeds that are in out in space. But then also, from my journeys, and I've been on a deep journey of yoga and meditation, spending time in the rainforests and connecting to indigenous ways. And it's come to me that humans are part of nature, and that we're part of what nature is doing, and that nature and the earth wants to reproduce and spread life, and that's part of what she's doing through us. And so we're here partly to continue the cycle of life in the universe. And yeah, it might seem like we're destroying the earth and using all the resources and building these high-tech rockets and filling them with rocket fuel. And but I'm increasingly seeing that as kind of like a natural process. It's like we're the cells of the earth, and we're doing what the earth is doing. And that in the grand story of the universe, planets either get filled with life and then one day burn out when their sun gets too hot or their sun burns out, or the planet goes on to reproduce and spread life. And yeah, that either could be with intelligent beings like humans going out to new planets and actually planting new worlds and populating them, or it could be by sending seeds outwards. And I feel like in the grand history of the universe, back all the way to the Big Bang, there's a few big moments on that timeline. And one is when, like, planets formed. One is when life emerges on a planet. And it might be all over the place, or it might just be here on Earth. We don't know for sure. I do think the universe has a lot of life in it. But but when life emerges, that's like a monumental point on the timeline of the universe. And then when life becomes conscious and understands itself and understands what the universe is, that's another point on the timeline. And then when a planet goes on to reproduce and spread life beyond that initial planet and starts to ripple life across the galaxy or to new places, that's like another point. So, and it feels like we're right at that point in the story of the universe, is when a species is intelligent and conscious enough to know itself, and is at the point of being able to become multiplanetary, and even think about being multistellar and send life to other star systems. And so it's a pretty epic time that we're living in, both as far as the challenges and what we're dealing with here on Earth. But I'm an optimist, and I think humanity is an incredible species, and I think we're a species to make it to the stars, and we're a species to ripple life out across the galaxy, and that one day they'll talk about the humans that overcame, and now there's a million new worlds of life out there from what we did.
Just hearing you talk right now, like, it reminds me of all the sci-fi books I ever read, about human living in different galaxies. Um, and perhaps this ties in Lifeship and its mission, right? But how do we become a multiplanetary species?
It's all kind of happening. The rockets are being built that'll carry people to the moon and Mars and actually build settlements and cities there. There are companies building the habitats to live in. There's companies building the little rovers to go collect ice and turn it into water and collect materials and print it into buildings and mine asteroids for metal and grow food on the moon and on Mars. And so there's a lot of efforts there towards humanity living on multi planets. I believe that's a very important endeavor because all our eggs are in one basket, and many of the people that I know that are into space settlement are like totally all about Earth and the biggest like fans of Earth because the more you look further out, the more you see that okay, there's it's rare we're going to find anything as incredible as Earth, like ever. And so I believe that we can protect Earth, we can preserve Earth, and it's very important to have our eggs in multiple baskets and to be multiplanetary and to have life in other places. And so one piece of that is humanity and having humanity on multiple rocks floating through space that are independent and self-sustaining. And if if something happened to one of them, the other could survive. And so that's a core moment in redundancy is when you have life on multiple places. And so that's humanity. But I also feel that we have a bit of an obligation to continue life in the universe. And that may also be by sending seeds out that start new worlds and start new life. And then I also see we have an obligation to preserve the all the species we have today for 7 generations from now. So we know we're losing. I think we lose 100 to 200 species every day. They go extinct and disappear without trace. And I think we've sequenced or we've named and identified 1.5 million species on Earth, but we think there's about 8 million species here on Earth. And and so it seems wise and it seems like we have an obligation to save a backup of all those species. And the simplest way we could do that is by saving the DNA. And the DNA is not everything, but there are projects going on. There's a project going on to bring back the woolly mammoth based on DNA from that was found tens of thousands-year-old DNA from woolly mammoths. So there are actual real projects that are think they're only a handful of years away from being able to do something like that. And so since that technology exists and is well underway, it seems like it makes sense to save backups of all of Earth. And you never want to save your backups all in one place. And so we have seed banks here on Earth with seeds of all different plants that are meant to last for thousands of years and save a copy of them, but we don't have an off-world copy of Earth and a copy that's in space. And so that's part of the big vision of Lifeship is both we're saving a backup of all the different species of Earth and humanity and space, but it's also towards building seeds that we can send to new worlds. And then someday when humans go off on spaceships to to go to one of these planets found down around another star system that we think we can live on. Only a few humans will go on one of those ships. They'll probably be put in like a hibernation state for a 100-year journey or whatever, but they'll bring with them either either like embryos or seeds or DNA to grow a new world when we get there and to populate a new world. And that concept exists in many sci-fi movies and books and yeah, so that all is the concept of Lifeship is that we're let's back up Earth and save it in space for future generations, and let's take steps towards those seeds and those banks that we can take to new worlds and grow new worlds someday.
How did the idea of Lifeship came about? What made you so passionate about this mission? Like phrased differently, why do you believe that as a species, humans deserve to, uh, live in other planets as well, considering what we're currently doing to this one? Maybe like if we treated this planet more gently collectively, there wouldn't be a need. or so urgent a need to, explore others?
Yeah. So the vision for Lifeship came when I was actually down in the rainforest in Central America, and I went deep in the forest by myself, and I found this grandmother tree that had all this life coming off of it. Probably, I don't know, thousands of species, like all these mushrooms growing off it, all these ferns, all these vines. And I meditated under this tree, and in this meditation I got like the visual and the transmission and the story of, I saw life evolving on earth in the ocean, and then coming out on land, and then I saw it learning how to fly and go up in the air, and just like filling out and fully blooming in all these different ecosystems of just like filling out with all the life it could figure out how to figure out. And then and then the earth wanted to reproduce, and so it grew humans, and it gave us all the food we needed, and gave us all the plants and the medicines and everything to sustain us. And that really our biggest role is to help the earth reproduce and to spread life. And so maybe we're doing exactly what we're supposed to, as far as using the resources to help do that. And I know we can do better. And I know, I know, on the surface it looks like we're doing a horrible job, but maybe in the grand scheme of things, like we're we're supposed to be using the resources to further life and to continue life. And yeah, I do believe that caring for earth and preserving earth is a core part of that, and I think we can do both. I think we're learning how to, we may not be doing it all, but we're learning, we at least know how to care for the earth better, and we're starting to implement things, and technologies are getting better. And yeah, and then we're learning how to move outwards into space. And I feel that this may be, our greatest purpose in the universe, is to ensure that life continues on.
So, how did you go about from meditating under this tree and somehow having the vision of what you were supposed to do, what you were supposed to achieve? So, how did you go from that vision to creating your company? Because it's a fairly complex product. I mean, uh, it's not exactly the an e-commerce, that you just just create the website and you're live, you know.
Totally. I I built a lot of stuff in space, and I really tuned into how to do things in Silicon Valley. The word is agile. And agile means to make fast decisions, to not like make the whole thing perfect and do everything all at once, but to do MVPs, minimum viable product. Like, what is the smallest thing that could demonstrate something and like move something forward? And it pretty much instantly came, oh, we can just do a DNA bank. Like a DNA is absolutely tiny. We could just do a tiny DNA capsule in space, or a DNA capsule on the moon, and that both is a backup, is a valuable thing. But then there's also a product we can do there. We can include people's DNA in it, and then also data and information is tiny. And if we're going to send the DNA up there, let's also include people's stories and a cultural record of humanity and the story of all of this. So pretty quickly came that, okay, this is a DNA seed bank and a record of humanity, and a product that we can do is for people to be part of space exploration, and for people to preserve a copy of themselves. And maybe for those people someday, there it's either the fantasy or the possibility of being born on a new world someday. There's not really been a real consumer space product to be part of space exploration, where you actually watch the rocket launches and are part of it, and know a piece of you is on it. And these concepts exist in all sorts of sci-fi. That, yeah, a first product of just preserving your blueprint of yourself, your DNA, and then your photos and story and your legacy in space, that came pretty quickly.
For people that are listening to the podcast and are not watching the YouTube video, I'm smiling a lot during this conversation because this gets me really very, very excited. So just like thinking about it. And when you think about it instead, like this record of humanity, like as you call it, the story in the DNA, what do you think is the impact that this could have? And what are the next steps? So like you mentioned that in your mind this is an MVP, and in my mind, like building digital products, this is like a full-fledged thing. It's not an MVP, but I imagine that if the ultimate goal is becoming a multi-planetary species, that is indeed an MVP, right? uh, so like from MVP, what are the next steps, in your opinion, that needs to take place?
Totally. And I'll start with where we're at because this isn't just an idea. We've already sent two different capsules to space. They flew up on SpaceX rockets in partnership with NASA, and these rockets had four astronauts on board, each of them, and we sent a capsule up to the International Space Station, and it orbited Earth for a long time, and was the an off-world backup of Earth. And we sent thousands of people's DNA in it, and then over 500 species. And a lot of that was plant species and food species, and you know, some of the core plants from around the world, and many of the food crops that we rely on. And so we already sent two of those. We're on two different rockets to the moon. So we're sending two of these to the moon. We're working on other missions to deep space, and then on other important satellites and other things that are going to be in space. So the big thing is to create a solar system wide backup of Earth, and eventually have these on Mars, have them on asteroids, have them on other planets, and then also send them out of the solar system and send them eventually to other star systems, and then also have a bank that future humans can take with them when they go out. And I imagine when humans are living on Mars, they'll have a bank with them there of a copy of Earth over there. And so the vision is that that's what we're creating, is those banks and the seeds to send outwards. And then we made a consumer product, and the consumer product, we've sold 3,000 of them, and they're affordable. They're $100, and people add their DNA and their story to it, and then they tune in and watch the rocket launch as part of a community and watch it land on the moon. The lander has live video feed of it, and then we'll have a way that you can be on all the different missions and go to all the different places and collect your Mars badge when you get to Mars, and then vote on the different missions we do, vote on whether we're saving the elephants next or the giraffes next. So it's kind of like a participatory space movement that's powered by a community, and then Web3 and decentralized technology is woven into all of this. So it becomes like a space agency for humanity that people are a part of and have a say in. And so that, yeah, that's all part of the direction. And then also it becomes more and more a backup of you and a copy of you to propagate you to the stars. And so that's your DNA, but then we're also working on AI to interview you about your life story and who you are and your purpose and your dreams, and what legacy you want to leave behind, and your childhood. And so we'll have a way that you can go as deep as you want to into your story and who you are, and that kind of becomes like training data for your avatar of yourself, and it becomes this digital twin copy of yourself, and that that will live on beyond you. And then there's more we want to do with that being a decentralized copy of yourself that you can pass on to your great great grandkids and pass on to future generations. And so really it is opening the concept of not just the earth and humanity's legacy and life in the universe, but an individual not disappearing without a trace, and an individual being part of the branch of life that lives on in the universe.
This is extremely fascinating, and I wonder, how do you coordinate such a complex product, like all those moving pieces together? How do you keep them together and make sure, that uh, everything is marching in the right direction and in the right order?
Good question. I guess it's all MVPs and agile, and it's there is a big vision there, but there is also, okay, we've started with the surveys. They ask you questions about your life and who you are, and that builds towards becoming a representation of your consciousness and an upload of who you are. But for now, it's just questions you answer about yourself and what you would be remembered for. And then the space missions are a piece to, I guess this is my background and my strength is holding multiple priorities and being able to see the big picture and know that, okay, one email I'm working on getting stuff to an asteroid, the next email I'm working on like an AI to interview a person, and next I'm working on whatever, paying a bill. It's like, yeah, it's holding those multiple priorities, seeing the big vision, and I really feel that everything I've that's led me to who I am and where I'm going and where I'm headed and what I'm doing now. There's a Steve Jobs quote that you can look backwards and all the dots connect, leading to where you are. And you don't know where they're going in the future, but you can kind of have a bit of an idea and trust where they're headed. But you don't know exactly what dots are going to lead to what. And yeah, it feels like I've done a lot of product management and understanding what products are and how to pull them together. I've done program management and known all the different moving pieces of different projects and how to manage that, and then done all the space stuff. And so it's it's a lot, but it also feels like it is in flow and it's happening and it's meant to happen.
Do you have any particular framework or thought process that consistently helps you move the needle or making progress in achieving your mission?
I do come back to nature a lot, and when there is a decision, like it sometimes it feels like either the decisions, if it's not like wanting to be made, yeah, it either feels that it's it'll flow and be made at the right time when it's meant to, and sometimes I feel like I don't even make the decisions, like they just get made all at the right time. But oftentimes a good walk in nature or sitting and just like looking at plants blowing in the wind can often lead to some clarity, and so I do often feel like nature speaks to me, and sometimes I go and stare at some plants and start asking some questions to an insect that's there, and maybe it like wiggles its antenna in a certain way and like shows me a little spot on its back, and it like feels like it's like the universe teaching me something and showing me something, and so I do, yeah, I do get a lot of answers from nature, that and some of those, yeah, some of those just feel like too perfect to have been interpreted any other way. And a wiggle of an antenna is not a good example, but like sometimes I feel like nature shows the answers.
Okay, then let me put it this way. How did you learn to open up to nature like this? Was it something that you had to learn, or is it something that, since you mentioned, as a kid, you were, a lot in nature, playing with Lego and stuff, or is it a muscle that you had to build over time? And if so, how did you build it?
I've consistently spent a lot of time in nature, but there was a good chunk of my life where more of that was on runs or like climbing and moving fast and achieving and accomplishing and getting somewhere. And since starting this company, I've learned to slow down a lot more in nature, and that's also been my path with meditation and yoga, and it's to be more present and to listen and to tune in. And so now now more of my hikes in nature end up with me like just finding a little field or a gorgeous rock in the middle of a stream to sit on and sit there for a half hour and just like really slow down and watch and listen and tune in and yeah, so there is a more of a tuning in that happens now for me, and that that leads to clearing decisions out of my mind, clearing these mental challenges, clearing out emotional stuff, and then also bringing clarity and showing answers and giving ideas.
Hmm, interesting. I'm asking you a lot of this question because I'm always curious what's behind the success of people that are building successful business, but most of all, because plenty of people can build plenty, but like people can build successful businesses, but not everyone can build visionary companies. With such a great mission. And therefore, I'm always fascinated on what's behind the scene. What is it that people don't see that drive this kind of people? So that's why I'm asking you all this question. I'm very fascinated by it.
Yeah, and I think one piece that comes there is, sometimes when starting a company, there's like the idea of like, oh, here's a product I can sell, or here's, and with this, it was more like, here is something that feels like is meant to happen in the universe. And and then it was working back from that of, okay, here are the products and the steps and the way of doing it. And yeah, when it feels like something is aligned to a core big vision, need in the story of the universe, then it has an authenticity with it, and it feels like, okay, this is a natural process and a natural part of what's meant to happen.
Going in this direction, what would you advise other entrepreneurs who are looking to launch a startup in such a highly specialized and technical field, such as that of space exploration?
So space is a unique area where a lot of ideas, if you really want to do them, are very expensive. It requires sending lots of stuff to space and or big things in space, or and have very long timelines and cost a lot. Generally, the companies that are becoming successful and making progress are ones where there either is something that can be done as a product here on Earth that then will enable future things in space, or there are lower cost demonstrations that can be done in a fast pace and to show progress, and that hopefully those demonstrations are can have revenue associated with them and turn into a business. And so yeah, I think breaking things down into finding, okay, what are the smallest demonstrations and what are the smallest products that can be created that take steps towards bigger and bigger visions is particularly a challenge in the space industry, because there's just such a barrier of entry, and the barrier has come down because it's, back when I got into space and was working on this 10 years ago, it was still really hard to get on rockets, and it was still really expensive to do a lot of things in space. But now it's become much easier and more affordable, but there still is a barrier to entry to create a space company.
What was your main challenge when creating Lifeship?
Good question. So the first year I had a lot of ups and downs with it. And I would say my downs were when I got triggered around confidence or imposter syndrome, or what the heck am I doing? People think this is a scam, send your spit to the moon. Like, yeah, what am I doing with my life? Sending people spit to the moon. And and so there were periods there where it was like, what am I doing? Are people really going to pay for this? Can I really do this? Can I really get on these rockets and get these sent to the moon, get these sent to space? And are people going to see the bigger vision? And I've been at this for 4 years, and so now it's more clear what the big vision is and what it is. And I knew from the beginning that this was about spreading life, but it was not as clear how this all comes together as far as a product, as far as it being a seed bank backup, as far as it being a step towards seeding life. And so over time, the vision is still gaining clarity, and I'm still learning about it all the time. And I guess one piece of advice and one thing that I really learned is that this company and this mission and what I'm building for a while I thought is like, Ben's company or like my company is like, okay, what am I building? What am I doing? Okay, we can do this and we can do and and then at some point it started to become like, oh, this is an entity and a mission and a thing and a movement that's meant to exist in the universe. And it has its own look and flavor and brand and way of being, and it's not me creating it, it's more me like chiseling away and uncovering what's there. There's something meant to be there on earth and in the universe and in humanity that serves this role. And what does that look and feel like? What does that do? What are its values? What are its purpose? And it's, yeah, it's not as much me painting that on it, and it's more me discovering the natural inherent qualities of this movement and organization and what it is and what it's meant to be.
Yeah. I think it's very, very fascinating. Mm, Speaking of fascinating, what do you think are the biggest opportunities in the space industry right now? And maybe some of the things that, listeners think might think are, impossible or sci-fi, but that instead are becoming reality or will be reality.
So there's one saying I've heard that every company will become a space company. There's another that's like, okay, if your company doesn't have a space strategy, you need one. And really, it's essentially that the rockets are being built that are kind of like the airplane moment of when airplanes suddenly opened up new continents and travel from point to point in an entirely new way. And yes, we've had rockets and been able to send stuff to space, but the new rockets being built, primarily by SpaceX, are fully reusable, the biggest rockets ever built, and they're more like airplanes than the traditional rockets as far as they go up and they come back and they land and they refuel and then they go up again and they can carry tremendous amount of stuff up there. And so it suddenly is like the railroads are opening up the frontier of the West, and lots of stuff is going to be built. And all the things that you have here on Earth, whether it's, hotels and buildings, but also like janitors and trash service and water and cleaners and like food and restaurants and bar, like all the like mail delivery, like all the businesses you need here on Earth will be needed in space. And there will be much less of a barrier of, oh, we're just doing this here on Earth, and there's those big defense contractors that do the space work, and it's more just like, okay, there's planes that go between North America and Europe, and there's ships that take all the stuff back and forth. It's just like there's much less of a barrier. Really, space is only 400 kilometers up. It's just that the rockets have been so expensive and thrown away every time we use them. It's really like it's going to become a lot closer, and that there's just going to be very, very regular delivery and easy access. And yeah, many people still, I think, feel, oh, I'll never get to space. And it's only like billionaires. And even I think a lot of people carry that forward, 10 years from now or so. But really, these rockets are being built to do point to point travel around the world as well. And so if you want to fly from Los Angeles to Singapore, I don't know how long a flight that is, but it's probably like 16 hours or so. And with a rocket, you could do it in 30 minutes. And that didn't make sense before because the rockets couldn't land and you'd have to throw the whole rocket away. But once you just need to put fuel in, it actually is more fuel efficient to fly up to space where there's no air resistance, rocket around the earth in like 30 minutes and then land in the other place than it is to push the airplane through the wind the whole time and do it for 16, 18 hours. And so really it's going to become a lot more standard for people to just go into space to even go somewhere else on earth, and the barriers are just going to become much less of a only astronauts can do that and much more of a okay, I can just book my 2-day plane ticket to the moon and go visit and stay in a place there and stay for a week and come back.
Ben, talking with you is endlessly fascinating. I could talk uh, to you for hours, and I would really love to have you back, at some point in the future to discuss the development you made with live ships. Is there anything else that listeners could do for you, or that you would like to leave as a closing thought?
Well, our website is lifeship.com, and we're on many socials at Lifeship. And people can add their DNA, people can add their pet's DNA, people can add their story and photos. We also send level one's ashes, and I'm very accessible as well. So if there's anyone that has a piece of this that they want to chat about or ideas or whatever, then reach out.
So we will leave all the information in the show notes and in the description. Ben, I want to thank you so much for being here and for answering all of my questions. Really,
Aw,
thank you.
thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so good to chat and wanna touch back in again and yeah, excited about your journey as well.
And for listeners, see you on the next episode. Bye. That's all from today's episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you find this episode valuable, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the Polyweb podcast on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. It will be fantastic if you could leave us a rating, a review, or a comment, as this really helps other listeners find the show. All the resources mentioned in this episode will be linked in the description and in the show notes. See you on the next episode. And if you cannot wait until next week, you can watch this episode right here that relates to some of the things that we talk about in this episode. Bye.